Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? I am so grateful to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Jill Carrero. I lead our sales team here at Orange Photonics. Today, we are going to discuss how Light Lab 3 is uniquely positioned to suit the very broad, very complex quality control screening needs of today's fast-paced cannabis industry. So let's stay tuned. It is very exciting to have you with us here today. I've got my awesome teammate, Ashley Seraphin, here with me as well to assist in organizing any questions that you have as we go along. I do ask that you pose those in the chat box wherever it is. I have a lot to share with you. So we will try to get to them at the end of today's conversation. But if we aren't able to, I assure you that we'll reach out by phone or email afterwards. I've been really looking forward to having this chat with you. A lot of what I'll share with you today are insights that I've learned over the last couple of weeks and months as I've just recently joined the OP team. And I've been spending a lot of time with our customers and learning from them. And it's really been very fruitful time spent for me. So I wanted to say thanks if you've allowed me time with your very busy teams and into your spaces. So 2021, it has been a wild year already. We are still in a bit of a purgatory pickle when it comes to the American cannabis market. Frankly, cannabis is still a Schedule 1 federally controlled substance here. And some of our great states hold to that line very closely still. However, with every passing month, that map gets greener, so to speak. And right now, we stand at 34 states that cannabis is medically prescribed. 17 have also legalized cannabis for the adult use recreationally. And then over a dozen have also decriminalized marijuana. And then, of course, to the Great White North, they've been legal recreationally for nearly half a decade now. So, according to recent reports, one from New Frontier included, the US cannabis retail market size was just over $38.3 billion in 2020. And that is definitely worth noting that that doesn't include the nearly $40 billion that were illegally spent in the cannabis industry or cannabis market, I should say, in 2020. So with easy projections bringing the market to over $80 billion by 2025, it is high time that folks start taking quality very, very seriously. When it comes to what's happening in the industry, well, without cursing all of us, there is definitely a genuine attitude shift, right? We can all feel it towards legalization. And those conversations are happening not just at the political level, but they are happening between grandparents and grandchildren. They are happening between neighbors and coworkers in a way that they never have. Between January and April of 2021, there were 39 new legislative and regulatory reform initiatives introduced or furthered or even passed at the state level here in the United States. So 39 in 4 months. When you take just kind of a quick rough count over the last few years, in 2016, there were 9 through the whole year. In 2017, there were 10. In 2018, there were 21. And then in 2019 and 2020, there were 25 new reforms that were moved forward at the state level. So in 4 months, there were twice as many in the highest year over the past couple of years. That is some serious momentum. And even if other metrics don't follow along perfectly, you've got to pay attention to that. You're also seeing doctors readily prescribing and advocating for cannabis. We're seeing more educated consumers. We're seeing a very wide diversification of the product types and delivery mechanisms that our consumers are asking for. So I look at that and I consider how important it is that this highly regulated industry doesn't make mistakes, right? Doesn't make specifically any big repeat mistakes that maybe other industries might be allowed, right? The national focus is on the end of cannabis prohibition. And there is no secret. There is no secret that there are big changes to come for the businesses who want to stand up in this space for years to come. And I don't think that's really a bad thing, actually. because what is likely to come, what might be likely to come, is alignment of regulatory best practices. And it'll drive from a hyper focus on consumer safety. So full disclosure, I have worked for most of my career helping pharmaceutical and pharma agroscience companies to basically use handheld and portable technologies to solve their manufacturing problems. And as I get to know more and more folks in this cannabis space, it is quite evident that these heavily regulatory industries, they all have very, very similar challenges. And best practices from these other industries are being adopted pretty readily as well, I'm happy to say. Whether it's quality control and quality assurance generally, but good manufacturing and laboratory practices, GMP and GLP, through certified standards and validation protocols are being just much more the norm. Standard operating procedures are clearly important. And then quality by design and PAT, which is process analytical technology. These are kind of the last two that have really stood out for me because it's where I think that there's the most space to adapt and to apply a layer of really great science to what is currently kind of in the cannabis industry, like tribal wizardry. So what is PAT? PAT, again, it's process analytical technology. It's a mouthful. It basically means using timely collection of data to improve your processes, which should result in better products and less mistakes and essentially more profit. It's highly related to quality by design. I mentioned that on the previous slide because both are essentially focused on using manufacturing processes to ensure predefined quality at the end product, right? You know what you want your product to be, so let's take steps along the way to make sure that we get there. Learning how to tweak your own processes to get the most from your systems, that's really what's key here. Frankly, companies across the cannabis space, they really should understand the value of PAT because, if they think more seriously about it, the way we grow this plant and the way that we make products from this plant, they could really be improved through just a layer of traceable science. Now, I don't actually want to oversimplify PAT too much. I kind of have already. I may have some former colleagues coming after me because true, like pharma level PAT, those systems can keep people secure in their employment for decades, and they will often employ thousands of sensors and analytical instruments, tons and tons of processing power to get that job done. And they look like this, right? You got product in, product out, you're measuring what happens with your end product. But really my goal for right now, it's not to explain all of that, but it's to share with you the ways that I've seen Light Lab customers already begin to use their instruments in like PAT-like tools that can add a lot of value when they're used wisely. So it looks a lot more like this. I had a top MSO director just tell me yesterday that there is a significant sea change across the board when it comes to cannabis science in the United States. And I think Light Lab fills a pretty meaningful gap there. For those of you who don't know Light Lab and why it may be good for this purpose, well, quick synopsis. Light Lab is a portable high-performance liquid chromatograph. It uses selective separation chemistry, just like lab-based HPLC, right, to separate out your cannabinoids and quantify them. It makes it very, very, very different from other portable cannabis analyzers that are just based on spectroscopy alone. It measures potency profiles, including the top 13 cannabinoids in your sample. We are very, very happy to announce that we just today, in fact, released a brand new software algorithm for Light Lab 3. We are excited to share with you that your cannabinoid profiles also now include the very, very high profile Delta 8 THC in the minors module. We've also included some really cool features, one that we call the mobile monitoring feature, which essentially allows you to remotely monitor and share and review Light Lab data, quality data on your phone or your tablet using secure QR codes. So these features are really exciting to us, and you should stay tuned for a new webinar coming soon on those subjects. When talking about our customers, They really have some complex applications even within this, singular cannabis space, if you will. Um, we serve the medical space, we serve the adult use space, and the hemp space. Those customers will include cultivators and extractors, and of course, their processing and packaging partners. We'll talk a lot more about all of those in just a second here. Laboratories, even, and then regulatory agencies and law enforcement. A lot of their drive is behind protecting the legal cannabis market now, so they'll use the product to differentiate hemp and cannabis. They'll also use it to, essentially confirm materials at border inspections and things like that. Research departments and universities, they'll use Light Lab more and more every single day. It's awesome for teaching opportunities for students coming out of some of the leading universities in this country, and to conduct plant research. This is super exciting to us, actually, because it's long overdue. And we are working with some amazing teams to do some awesome studies with universities. We are right now going to dive into a couple of examples about processors and cultivators and how they learn from their Light Lab. But really everybody's got quality on their mind. So why is in-house QC testing so important? Well, really, it's because having timely data shortens your go-to-market timeline because you're accelerating your own decisions. Moreover, you're realizing tons of yield improvements. You're allowing yourself to have a lot more confidence in your results before your C of A. You don't just rely on that NC of A. You know what your processes are and what you're driving to. And of course, you can also, minimize your testing expense because you don't have to do as much outside as you can now inside. And then that threshold peace of mind that comes with having in-house testing for the hemp LPs across the United States, to be able to, push your CBD limits as much as you possibly can, but stay below that 0.3% THC limit. That's a real key contributing factor for in-house QC testing value for those folks. But why is it really so important? It's because you're giving your teams the ability to develop new products, right? This is a super, super evolving market. It's very competitive, and this gives your teams the ability to develop new products, new cultivars at light speed, basically as fast as trends evolve, and to do so with a level of quality that affords your customers consistent and reliable, consumer experience. And that lends to your brand and, exceptional growth for your products. So no matter where you find yourself within the industry, there are tons of places where you can, have touch points for quality control with a Light Lab. This is just a quick timeline across the cultivation space from, cloning stage all the way through storage. But when we're looking a little bit more closely, we could think about things like phenotype selection. That's really, really essential because you're ensuring performance based on, cultivation environment and getting your product to the desired cannabinoid ratios for whatever, your product application is. And that may be very different depending on where you live, if it's California or Massachusetts or Oregon, or what kind of product that you're making. When you're doing development work, there is just so much discussion. Every day I hear more discussion around kind of the idea of stability of genetics backgrounds. And I always say, Light Lab is really, it makes it readily accessible information at scale to you to understand those kind of questions that you may have about the background of your cultivars. And then when you're getting into, the actual process of cultivation and growing, and, if you're indoors and you want to understand the, the real effect of air temp and room temp and humidity levels and CO2 and velocities and things like that, well, now you can actually understand the effect of that on your product, on your grow, by measuring it as often as you want to for, just a couple of dollars a sample. And this is also similar, of course, when you're talking about outdoor grows, you can't control it nearly as much, but making proactive decisions about, the uncontrollable weather, that can definitely be a huge gain for people that are using Light Lab in their outdoor cultivations as well. And then if you're a hemp cultivator, again, we go to that 0.3% limit. It's all about timing, right? If you want to make sure that you time your harvest right around when you have, your Department of Agriculture come in, hemp or Light Lab allows you the ability to do that with your hemp grows. So I just really, I'm asking you to ask yourselves what can you learn when you test more than the minimum. When you do test with the Light Lab, this is what the results screen looks like. You can see there, Delta 10 is included, Delta 8 is included. And I wanted to show you some specific examples, essentially, of how people are learning from Light Lab results. In this very fast, hyper-competitive market, the value of Light Lab for the development effort shouldn't be overlooked, because it's definitely going to fast forward your phenotyping, selection, matrices, and all those efforts. But every organization is different, so looking at a couple of examples might add some great value for you guys. Specifically, at the seedling stage, when we're looking at that 2 to 3 week early grow stage, an adequate sampling of these kind of plants will allow your users to identify ratios between THC and CBD and identify the unique cannabinoid profiles of your plants. When you're moving, onto the vegetative stage of 3 to 8 weeks or so, you can really take a deeper dive. You can look at your miner's profile. You can take a look at what phenotypes are driving cannabinoid results in those grows, and monitoring different PK levels, how they're affecting your grows, assessing plant performance. This is all possible on the fly. And then, of course, at flowering stage, looking at your very key performance factors, total THC, that may tell you exactly the right time for your harvest. So these are all important places that people apply Light Lab during their cultivation, but there's just a few of them. And then when you're moving into curing and storing of your product, it allows you really to take a look closely at what can happen when you are careful and not careful during these processes. And it also allows you to make really much more informed purchase and sales decisions on the biomass, because you can really come to weigh out content levels against your predicted future extraction costs through your own on-demand cannabinoid profiles, right? You can understand, okay, this is what my cannabinoid profile looks like. This is what it's going to take me to get what I want in my end product, my distillate or my end oils. So it's really valuable information for the proactive manufacturer. When you're talking about, again, looking at specifically the results that can be gained from looking at Light Lab on the fly, when you're talking about looking at specifically the grows in your, forgive me, when you're looking at your grows, you can test large batches. You can understand the homogeneity of your sample. You can do many point-by-point testings across your batch and your grows to understand not just a single point of testing, but clearly what the homogeneity and THC levels or CBD levels are of your entire grow. You can also take a look more closely at CBN levels, and this will allow you really clearly to understand, things about storage. You're going to clearly see an increase in CBN if your dried or cured material has been exposed to too much oxygen or light. And then other folks are looking very much at the miner profiles to inform their product development, because they can understand if they've got a CBC or a CBN heavy product. So again, just a few examples here. Then moving into the extraction portion of the manufacturing timeline, when you're looking across the board, you essentially have the same thing: multiple points of quality control checks across the 4 stages of extraction. And really, processes are really concerned about quality control. They're managing product quality control all the time, and they're doing it yesterday. Whether it's heat exposure or you're just simply running longer than you really need to, there are tons of things that you can learn through your process about Light Lab. One example that we see over and over is the ability to kind of decrease your runtime by tweaking other parameters and getting a whole lot more runs into the day. That's an easy way to see efficiency gains in your processes, just by understanding more, by testing more of your samples. And as far as predictive decisions, much like a cultivator, the historical data will allow you to make assumptions on things like the runtime based on the quality of materials. As you're going through your derivation process, you can understand how things are changing. It's really valuable. Let's take a look at a couple of examples again from real extraction processes here. When we're taking a look at, all of the effects of winterization, the vacuum oven, solvent extraction on products, whether it's just looking at THC and CBD levels, you can really understand what's happening based on the different things that you're doing through your extraction process. You can also roughly fingerprint and screen your recombined derivatives. This is really key. You can identify outliers at line in real time. I want to share a really quick story with you of a recent visit that I made to one of our California-based customers. I was talking with a brand new engineer. It was actually his very first day there. He wasn't new to extraction, 10 years in extraction, but brand new to Light Lab and brand new to HPLC. And we were just running a couple of samples. And within just about an hour of running samples, he was understanding and really deriving a lot of valuable conclusions about the previous runs that they had done and different decarb variables and the effect on the product. And he was specifically calling out, like, look at the CBN here, because there shouldn't be that much CBN. I thought we had run it too long. And he was looking forward to doing more tests and understanding much more about their processes going forward. And that was a huge win obviously for Light Lab, but a huge win for their organization, for their company. And then if they want to screen material for issues with faulty equipment, you guys can do that. Looking at D10 levels, that'll easily tell you if you have a vacuum leak or if you have a hot spot in your system. These are all really easy places to apply Light Lab, but again, just 3 out of many, many. If you dive deeper into the extraction process, I'm not going to get into all of this, but this is a pretty great example of how many quality touch points can be examined in the different phases of the extraction process. From examining if you have different extraction techniques, the different efficiencies on different cultivars, all the way through to working out kinks in your crystallization processes. That's all possible with Light Lab. And the same insights can be derived from applying Light Lab throughout the manufacturing of all sorts of finished products, but we're going to delve into that on a different day, perhaps. But regardless of what the product is or even where you fit into the cannabis supply chain, the process is really the same of kind of figuring out this whole PAT thing with Light Lab. It's basically put the learning tool in the hands of your key stakeholders within your organization, people that understand, touch points about your processes. We'll teach them how to use it, and then doing the testing and collecting data is pretty intuitive, and it's likely that you're going to start to draw conclusions almost immediately. And then it's basically up to you to proactively make changes about your process and hopefully, make some more money for your company. And then, those savings, it's really just the start. I am definitely making a case for data here, right? HPLC based data, it's key. It's definitely the method of choice for cannabis analysis. So why shouldn't you go out and buy an HPLC? Well, as anyone who has real experience running an HPLC, a benchtop HPLC, that is, knows, basically what you do when you run one is you go in, you turn the lights on, you turn all the HPLCs on, you grab a cup of coffee, and then you're taking care of and maintaining HPLCs for hours of every day. That's something you really never think about. Neither is this. It's the sample prep, it's the dilutions, it's the requirements that go along with running an HPLC and getting the answers that you need from it. Light Lab is designed with an active, onboard, multiple nonlinear regression algorithm. So that is total mouthful. It's worth being said because it basically is what makes Light Lab a real fit for cannabis purpose LC. In all the ways that I've discussed with you today, and it makes it so that any of your team members can use it, which is pretty amazing because it usually takes a significant amount of chemistry to do this. And it's traceable, value-added insight, even if you've only got a couple people on your team. So as you evolve with Light Lab, so does the process, and then so do your results. So Light Lab does, though, offer you some unmatched, out of the box, fit for purpose performance. Our goal, though, is not. It is never to be exactly as good as a state laboratory. You need your certificate of analysis, the C of A to CYA, so to speak. But our goal is to deliver you accurate results for the questions you need answered, when you need them answered, as often as you need them answered, without paying $150 a test and waiting 5 days to get your answer. This is why we continue to participate in proficiency studies and to try to validate our claims, and we will continue to do so through this year. So again, stay tuned. We are aware that significant challenges currently exist in the cannabis industry. More and more testing is needed, and there's kind of a lack of consensus around methodologies. And even if you're an ISO 17025 certified facility with the same kind of instrument, there are still variables in the person, variables in the methodology, variables day to day. They're human, and the job is to run as many tests as possible. So, ASTM, AOC, FDA, these folks are all very familiar with kind of the gap that exists around cannabis testing. They have definitely found in other industries like pharma and like food science slots for fit for purpose solutions, just like Light Lab before. So here at Orange Photonics, we are definitely doing what's necessary to show that we stack up as a third or stack up in regards to third-party independent studies, so that we can show that we stack up in terms of precision and repeatability and performance. And we don't ever shy away from a challenge in performance. Light Lab actually recently participated in the University of Kentucky hemp program proficiency testing program. And essentially that involves 77 additional participants and us. I encourage you to go and look at the study on our website. But what came out of that was that Light Lab performance within the study showed that we perform as well, and in the case of over 60 of those lab or state qualified laboratories, we performed better than them. So the instrument's analytical capabilities are on par. And then the proprietary algorithm makes it really truly fit for purpose for the application of fast cannabinoid potency profiling. LC is the way to go, and a whole lot more testing is inevitable. Our industry is growing along a few main trend lines, right? It's either, and I think this is kind of the trajectory that is likely to be much more exponential, because it says people come into cannabis, they're looking at different cannabinoids that are not just THC. They are looking at entourage profiling, and they are looking at different kinds of products. So you've got that space growing. You've also just got the main driver of, the all-powerful total THC potency, right? And I had to include this cartoon here. Forgive me, guys. It's so funny. I'm sorry if you're offended in any ways, but it's just so true, especially if you're in the East Coast environment. But the point is, until Light Lab, there was not a viable solution to do in-house QC testing for either of these drivers. So to wrap it up today, a quick summary for you of the universal advantages to equipping your operation with Light Lab technology. If you want to basically make sure that your consumers and your customers are as happy as they possibly can be through product consistency, Light Lab offers that. You can certainly save money through your lab testing expenses. And more so, it's about, that PAT kind of conversation, right? Get immediate performance feedback. Understand how to take alternate actions to your processes and your grows in real time. Make continuous process improvements, because now you have kind of the power of data-driven decision making, right? You're here because you're building real cannabis businesses. A Light Lab allows you the easiest, most cost-effective data layer. I always think about it as a layer, because I don't discount all of that tribal instinctual knowledge that exists in cannabis space. But to add a layer of data to that's going to be a really valuable thing in moving this industry and your businesses forward. So with that, I do want to say thank you so much for joining us here today with over 500 active units all across the cannabis space here at OP. Orange Photonics, we are so happy to serve as your in-house quality rapid testing system for cannabis. We are definitely hoping that you reach out to us to implement Light Lab if you don't have one already. If you do own a Light Lab or a legacy Light Lab, we really do cherish the opportunity to support you further, to understand how to apply your tool more. And that said, I'm looking at the time. It looks like we're just to time. So I will cut us off there, but I will definitely make sure, Ashley, I'm sure that you've collected some great questions that have come in. We will make sure to follow up with you via email. Stay tuned for the next webinar on Delta 8. Thanks again and have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much. Take care.